This is the Stephen Hogan Podcast.
What did the 24-year-old Jake Rose need to know that he doesn't know now?
There's a lot. I wish I could go back and say a lot. I'd probably have a book to write to myself of my younger self, but I think not taking outside influence so much and trusting myself more, because as a young artist, I think I see it every day when people come into my studio, and I work with a lot of young artists now, and everyone's very influenced by outside opinions. And I was as well. Like, I got a record deal, and then the first thing I did was like try to appease whatever they thought I should sound like. I was like, oh, what do you think I should sound like? Okay, I'll be that. And I see it every day where it's like we write a song, and in the room, the artist is excited about it, and then they say, well, my manager didn't love it. And I'm like, well, that sucks. Like, do you love it? Because, like, what do you want to be, right? And I think I was very influenceable when I was younger, and I would just tell myself to, like, trust myself and what I truly, truly love about a song or whatever I'm doing in my career versus what I think everyone else will love about it. You know what I mean?
What was a lesson where you first learned that? When did you first kind of experience the shift in your brain where you were like, maybe their opinion doesn't matter that much?
Well, I'd say a couple of specific instances where I knew I had screwed up. And actually I had put my foot down a little bit, but not enough. I didn't understand how to, work the whole larger system of being at a major label at the time. Like, we had all these songs in the pile of like what we're going to record or whatever. And we had recorded an album that I thought was done. And then they were like, hey, we still need the first single. We just don't feel like we have a single for active rock radio. And I was like, I don't even know what active rock radio is. Like, it was like so niche format, right? Like, and I was just like, I like the Foo Fighters and Nirvana, like in Queens of Stone Age or something. And I like rock. And they were like, no, you're active rock. You're going to be on this kind of a channel with these kind of artists. So we need a song that sounds like this, even though that's not really what I thought we were. I mean, we kind of came up in this kind of like emo rock phase of like Thrice and like Under Oath. And we kind of had a little tinge of that. We were kind of rounding out to be more of like a regular rock band, but still, anyways, on our first record with Atlantic, they really suggested I go, write another song for the record. I wrote this song in New York City with these two producers, and I actually am friends with them still today. It's not their fault, but like they were sent a mission of what to do, and like I got there and I could feel like, oh, we're doing that. No matter, that's kind of like what they wanted. Hey, we think we should do this. Like, this is what the label wants. And then that was our first single. And even when we got done, I did the session and I thought, I'm not going to use that song. And then it was like, hey, there's your first single. And I was all of a sudden like, and I remember this producer, our first producer, his name is Bill Stevenson. And he was like, hey, whatever your first song is, like, that's what people are going to think of you as. So make sure you like, you know that, right? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, we'll have other songs. Like, the label wants this one, but I'm gonna get the second single, and that's a classic no-no for an artist to be like, oh, I'll let them have this one, and then I'll get the next single, right? Like, I'll pick the next song. And it's like, no, because that's what you're putting out there, right? And I let that happen, and we almost got dropped because of that, I think, because the song didn't do very well. It got to like 36 or something, and they had spent a bunch of money. We'd done a video and all that. And it was at that point where I was like, oh no, like I cannot do this ever. Like, I can't do that with my career. It's like, it was so quick to be like, all of a sudden, like I could just feel everyone abandoned it. Even though it was their idea, they abandoned it so fast. You know what I mean? Even though I, the whole time, was like, I don't love that song. I don't know why we're using that song. And then they're like, this is the first single. And then as soon as it doesn't do well, they're like, we never loved that song. And like, what's going on? And we had this song in the record. We had a couple of songs on the record that I really resonated with, and one of them was called Rich Kids, because I grew up around a bunch of rich kids, and it was a true story about like, hey man, I'm not a rich kid, but I'm doing it still. Like, I was set up to prove myself because I grew up around this huge disparity of wealth where I was poor and whatever. And like, that song resonated a ton with people, and that was this honest song, and that was me putting myself out there. And anyways, it all ended up working out in different ways, but that was a big lesson early on to know, like, don't let this machine, no matter what. And I felt like, oh, they're just going to drop me or whatever. So that's all, you're always up against that kind of thing. So just identifying what that is that you want to put out in the world and trust that, whether it means getting dropped or not, you know what I mean?
What got you your first record deal?
I would say just, being in Minneapolis, I'm from Minnesota, and we were like, never say die, like, independent DIY band where we were like, it started on MySpace, we're adding friends, it was pure volume, it was like all these things, and we just were like determined to do this DIY method, right, where it was just like, we're gonna make our own records, we're gonna sell them out of our van, then we're gonna book our own shows, and we did all that. And as we started doing that, we just started getting attention. There was some label rep from Atlantic that came to a show. I think she was like a photographer, and then she called the office in New York and said, hey, I think I found a band, like they're selling a couple hundred tickets, and like they've sold a bunch of CDs, and then we just kind of got on this train of all these record label meetings all of a sudden. I think back then it was kind of, I don't know if they just all shared the same information or something, but like it quickly, like we got passed around real quickly, and we at that time had like gotten an attorney who helped pitch us to other labels, I think. And once one came in, then a lot came in. And I always tell this story to let everybody know, like we ended up getting a meeting with Atlantic, and they said, we're going to fly to New York City. We love the band. We want to fly to New York City. You're going to put you guys up, and you're going to showcase for the head of the label, the head of A&R, and whatever, whoever else. There's like 4 people. So we fly to New York City. They put us up in a fancy hotel, and we go to the showcase. It's an empty room, and there's 4 people sitting on a couch, and they said, okay, play us your songs. And we were like, zero vibe, zero. And we're just these young guys, and we honestly, I think we killed it. Like, we crushed it. Were we ready? I don't know. I thought we were, and so we do this thing, and Atlantic said, we got a call like a week later, like, hey, we had heard all these stories of other bands and friends of ours that have been like, yeah, we played the showcase, and then like an hour later they like sent their deal over to our attorney, and we're like waiting, and then like they were just like, yeah, to pass for now, but like keep rocking. And we're like, oh no. But to our, we ended up going back to Minneapolis and just recording more songs, booked another tour, and then about a month later, another record label called us and said, hey, Epic Records, we love you, we want to sign you, and okay, bring you to New York City. We did it again, and then the same thing happens. This time it was, they were going to offer us a deal. We'll send you the deal next week. The next week, hey, the president of Epic Records just left, and now he's gone, and the whole staff is gone. And so there goes that one. And then we get another call, Universal Motown. Okay, fly you to New York City, do it again. I'm serious. Like, we did all these like showcases, and no. And we just didn't care. We were like, all right, well, I was like at the time, 18, 19, and I'm like, I'm just getting started. I'm young. Like, I'm ready to go. Like, so we just kept doing it, and we finally booked another tour about a year later. This was like a year of showcases and like ups and downs of like, are we going to be famous or not, And then finally we booked this tour ourselves. Somehow we got on this tour with Candlebox, who's like a 90s band, rock band, and we ended up in New York City in this other label called Photo Finish Records, which was a subsidiary of Atlantic. They were like, hey, man, I got a call, and it was like, hey, I don't know, like, this who you are, if this is the manager. And I was like, well, at the time we didn't really have a manager. And I'm like, yeah, it's me from the band or whatever. And I was like, well, we already showcased for Atlantic, and they said no. And they're like, no, it's like a whole new staff now, like, and it would be through us. And like, because I was kind of like, dude, we already have done this so many times, like, this isn't gonna happen, like, you know what I mean? And then they're like, well, let's just come to the show, like, I promise it's totally different now. And so they came to the show, and like, that was the time. There was a few other labels there too, and we were just at this point so numb to like, are we going to get it right? We just kept thinking like it's never going to happen because they just keep saying no. And then right after the show, were like, I was talking to someone from another label, and then they were like, hey man, come over here. And I'm like, what's up? And they were like, we're giving you a deal. And I was like, what? And like, that's how we got our first record deal. And it was such, I try to tell that to artists, because like, I couldn't tell you how many not even embarrassing, just like, like you play these and you just get so defeated by those no's. They're telling you no to your face. You're like, I literally flew from Minneapolis, played in front of you, played my heart out, and then you said no. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, no, you're not good enough. And it's just like, I try to tell artists that now. I'm like, I've had no so many times, And we ended up getting dropped from Atlantic 4 years later. So it's like, and we got another record deal after that. So it's a long, long journey. You know what I mean?
So let's go through that story a little bit. So you get that first deal.
Yep.
Is that where you put out the single that they wanted?
Absolutely, yeah. So we had I don't know how many songs we had written, but in that time period, the other part I think that why we got a record deal was because I started coming to Nashville, and I started driving down here. I had a rep named Justin Levinson from CSAC, and he was like, hey, have you ever co-written? And I said, no, I just kind of write the songs myself or with my band guys or whatever. And he's like, you should come down to Nashville and try it. And I was like, because we got a song on like MTV in a background music thing. And they're like, you got to get a PRO. So I got one. And then he's like, you should come down and try co-writing. And then I slept on his couch. He booked me with a few writers. And that was a big reason I think that we did get a deal, because the songwriting got leveled up. And that opened this whole thing of songwriting to me, which was like, oh, wow. There are so many better songwriters out there that I didn't realize that all these artists that I love are putting songs out that songwriters had at least something to do with the song. You know what I mean? Maybe the artist co-wrote it, but there's all these great songwriters. And so then I just got obsessed with coming down here. I would like save enough money, drive the 14 hours, sleep on couches, write as many songs as I could in a week, go back home, painting houses, farming, doing my thing to save up enough money to come back. And that was a huge reason, because the songs changed. They got so much better, I felt like. And a few of those songs are the reason like the label signed us. You know, they're like, we love this one. That's why we're signing you, you know. And on our first deal, yeah, that's where that story comes in of like, there was two parts. There was Photo Finished Records and there was Atlantic Records, and they had decided Atlantic was there to be like, hey, if this gets like to a point, we're going to upstream it to us. Well, you'll be on the big label. You have all these resources if you need them. And I think in the middle of our first record, they were like, Atlantic was hearing stuff and they were just like, hey, we want to like put them out right away on radio. Like, we want to be part of this from the jump. So let's hear all the songs again. And they kind of A&R, they got involved in the A&R process, and they were just doing their jobs, you know. And I have empathy for, you know, label people. They're just trying to do their jobs too. But I mean, they didn't understand what we were. And maybe we didn't understand what we were yet either. But I felt I had the heartbeat of what the best songs were, the ones that I felt were, you know, authentic and original. So that's where that story comes in. And yeah, that's where that deal and all that kind of transpired.
So going from that point, which is interesting to me in and of itself, that they were putting out music to rock radio.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, dude?
It's just like, yeah.
What happened to rock radio? What killed it?
I don't know. Also, like, that's the other thing about our band is like, I think, you know, we got signed in 2009, but I don't think our record came out till 2010. And by then it was like already like Shinedown had like a big hit called Second Chance on the radio, like on like Hot 100 rock. And then I never heard guitars on the radio ever again. I was like, you know what I mean? Like, it just didn't happen for like years. And at the time, that's right when like, I call it like Beards and Banjos, where it was like Mumford and Sons and like Lumineers, and all of a sudden that was like the thing, like, and it was like so awesome. We're this like kind of like commercial rock band, you know what I mean? I'm not gonna say we're not like kind of commercial rock band. That's kind of what we were. And yeah, radio for rock was just shrunk down to like, it's a niche, like no one listens to it. Like when I grew up in, you know, in the 90s, and I'm like, you know, I'm 36 now, but growing up 90s, early 2000s, the rock stars were like rock bands, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, like, that just went away. And so I think it was like a timing thing as well. And we were just like the end. We came in at the end, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it was an interesting time to kind of enter that side of the business.
I experienced that exact same thing, because I remember gravitating towards country music purely based off of the fact that there was guitars in it.
Right.
I was like, there's no music with guitars anymore.
Right.
That was literally my thought.
Yep. And so on our so yeah, I could fast forward here a little bit, but basically on we do our deal with Atlantic. We ended up, our first single doesn't do well. We're on the road. We're sleeping in a van, and like we had gotten an advance, and like it had gone to like buying a van and trailer, and then like it was just gone right away.
How big are these advances?
They're not point? Crazy. It's not what you think.
Yeah, because I've been told some advance numbers, and I always thought it would be like the old days, like when you hear of bands or rappers getting like crazy advances.
It was not, because we didn't have any leverage either. We were just like
because a lot of times they're like $100,000 or below.
Oh, it was less. Yeah, much less. And we basically bought a van for whatever, $10,000 and a trailer, and it was like, and we each got a couple $1,000, and then we were done. That was it. That was like, and then they're like, go on the road. And I think our first tour, we took a bus, because they suggested it, like, oh, you're doing this giant tour. We were going on tour with Disturbed, and they're like, hey, you should just use your tour support, and like you're gonna share this bus with this other band. And so there's another band on the bus, and the two of us shared it. And I remember just like seeing the bill and being like, what? That's how much a bus costs? And this is like 12, 13 years ago, you know? And I was like, we came home with nothing, $0. If anything, I think we owed money. And I was like, and then they're like, now you're out of tour support on our first tour, right? Hey, do you want to go? We need you to go on this other tour because you're going to do this radio tour. So we need you to go all these other cities. And we were getting paid $250 a show. And I don't mean per person. I mean for the entire band, $250. That's for gas. That's for hotels, everything. So we always had to survive on merch, right? Like we're like selling CDs, we'll sign them, we'll do whatever, we'll take a picture with you. And I think some of that has come back to pay dividends now, but at the time it was like, wow, we're really grassroots in this thing. And we felt like we're on a record label. Like, how are we so broke? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've heard that story again and again and again.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, for people that don't understand, and back to this younger you, what recoupable is and what that means and the gravity of it and the gravity of understanding contracts?
Yeah.
Because we talked a little yesterday about just the basic question of like, do you own your masters?
Right.
What does that mean? Like, let's go there a little bit.
Yeah, totally. Let's get into that. I didn't have any idea. I remember when I was young, someone at some point said, hey, the publishing, if you're a songwriter, you can make a lot of money on the royalties for songwriting if it's on the radio or if it's here. And back in the day, even when I started in 2007, 2008, 2009, I'm like just getting out of high school, records were still selling a bit then. And so one of my first cuts was on Meatloaf, who still sold a lot of records. And they were like, hey, back in the day, if you were a songwriter on an album, the song would maybe make 8 to 9 cents. And so if you wrote it 50-50, we would each get 4 cents so let's say 1 million records, that's 50 grand for me, 50 grand for you. So if I got a song on a Meatloaf record, which he at the time would sell millions of records, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be rich, like off of an album cut, right? And it turned out he did not sell that many. It was Meatloaf 30 years later, but he did sell some, and I got some decent checks from that, from owning a song on a record that actually sold. But anyways, to go into like recoupables, masters, publishing, master means the master recording, meaning you could record any hit you want. You could re-record it and own your version of that recording because you paid for the recording, you performed on the recording, or you hired somebody to record you, and so therefore you would own that master recording. And then the publishing is the copyright of the songwriting. So whoever wrote the song would get royalties for writing the song. So like, let's say I did this recently. I covered a Foo Fighters song. So like Dave Grohl gets, if my version of Times Like These gets, streamed, he gets paid a little royalty on that. But what's happened nowadays is the master in the streaming world is so lopsided, making like 10x almost like what the songwriting makes. And then you're always splitting the songwriting up with, multiple writers and maybe publishing deals, so the publishers get part of that. And so it's this huge disparity now. But another thing, going back to the business side on that, master recordings, like when I say like, whoever pays for them or whatever, like if you sign a record deal, you're saying I record exclusively for you, and everything that I put my voice on or perform on, you guys own. So when I signed a record deal, I understood that part of it, I guess. But what I didn't understand fully was how would I recoup and what would I all be recouping? And I did not understand all that, and especially at the ripe age of 19 and 20. Like I signed my deal when I was 20 because I couldn't drink. I remember I was like, my attorney, we were in New York City, and he's like, hey man, it's your first record deal. You want to get a drink? And I'm like, I'm 20, I can't, And I grew up on a farm. I grew up around no knowledge of the business. My dad does not have any knowledge of the business. He's a farmer. He's, so we just we're not used to dealing with attorneys and deal points and 60-page contracts. What I didn't understand is you get set a royalty when you sign to a record deal. Like you have a royalty rate. So a lot of them are like on the low end, 12 points to like maybe 18, 20 would be a lot, which means like 20%. 12 to 20%. And
they call the points the percentage. It's just a fancy word for percent.
Yeah, and there's ways to there's different, there's a producer points as well, which those come out of the artist. So right away, and typically between a mixer and a producer, it's like at least 4 points. So all of a sudden, let's say, I think our first deal was something like 16 points or something. Well, right away, it's down to 12 because we gave 4 to the producers. And so how it works was I just always thought, okay, of course we have to pay the money back, but they always tell you like when you sign, like, oh, if you just have a hit, like it's going to be nothing, right? And we had gone out to these, dinners and stuff where they bought, $1,000 dinner in New York City or something. And we're like, this is awesome. Not knowing, oh, wow, this is going on our tab. That's not just their Atlantic Records fund money tab. It's like, no, that's on your tab. You're going to have to recoup that. And this is the part that everyone at Link doesn't understand. I thought every dollar that comes in is going to recoup whatever they spent on us, right? And it's not. It comes in at whatever the rate of which you had signed it for. So like, let's say ours is 16. So 16% of what we bring in goes to pay our balance, right? So let's say we bring in $100,000. Well, only 16,000 of it recoups. So now it's like let's say we had $100,000, tab to start off with as a round number. And we generate $100,000. Well, to them, they would say, well, you're still $84,000 in the hole. And I'm going, what? You made all your money back. And it's like, no, this is how you recoup. So it's like they're taking money off the front end too. You know what I mean? And it's basically like the worst business deal possible. But I think they prey on your dreams. They prey on, hey, we're going to put you on the radio. And at that time, at that age, I would have done anything. So, I think that's a big reason. But I think regardless, I don't even say that like it can work. That model can work. If you have giant hits, it doesn't matter because you eclipse all that and it's okay. But I think it's just important to understand any deal that you're going into and fully understand it. I didn't fully understand it. I felt like I knew, okay, whatever they spend on us, we have to pay them back. But once we pay them back, I'll get a little piece as well. And if we sell millions of records, that little piece will be worth a lot. And it's so rare for it to go that way. And I wish I would have known some of that going in, and it would have maybe affected how I watched them spend money, you know what I mean? And so I just want young artists to know that information, and because I think information and transparency is key. Not that you can't today sign a record deal with a label that everything works out, and that's okay. You know, hey, they are going to make that, but they're giving me this, and I'm cool with that. As long as that's the case, but I didn't understand that at the time,
And I think the margins are even smaller now because of 360 deals.
Absolutely. Yeah, we did a tour. We had one of the first 360 deals. I think Paramore had the first 360 deal, but we had a 360 deal as well on Atlantic, and like so they take part of your merch, part of your touring, like the show money, and all your records, a piece of everything 360. And I remember we did a tour where like we sold $80,000 in merch on a tour, and we came home with like $2,000 each after like a month of like sleeping in a van, begging people to buy T-shirts and CDs. And once we paid taxes, manager, label, business manager, insurance, all these things that we're like, what? And here's what's left over. And we're like, wow, we're going to have to make so much for us to even like survive. You know what I mean? And those opportunities, we were on a big tour. Like those don't come along all the time for us to make that much money. It was like, oh, this is a great opportunity for us. We're going on an arena tour. Like hopefully we can come home with some real money. And then we come home with $2,000 after a month of sleeping and, sharing beds. We slept in our van all the time, just to try to save money. So it's a different thing than people understand, And with streaming now, that was back when we were selling CDs. At least we could like charge $15 for a CD, and we would have to give a lot of it back to Atlantic. We had to pay them per CD to buy our own CDs. That's the other thing. We would buy our CDs from Atlantic, $7 a pop, and then we could sell them for whatever we want for profit. But that's gone away now. No one buys CDs anymore. It's all streaming, And so it takes millions and millions of streams to equate to that. You know what I mean?
So at the end of the day, the artist is out of the whole business. The person that is creating the very thing that is generating the revenue is making the least amount of money.
I think in a lot of cases it's not even that it's like they're the last person to get paid. You're always the last person to get paid, and it's everyone around you the whole way is like, yeah, but wait till you get paid. You're gonna get paid so big, it's gonna be so awesome, and it's just like it can be forever, and sometimes it never happens, right? And you see it all the time. You know what I mean? Like I said,
in what other business does that happen?
I don't know, man. I here's the other thing. I just grew up where the more work you put in, like you just keep to grow and like you get better, and then like you get you keep doing your job well, that like you would get a raise. And in the music industry, the second you're like not performing well or whatever, you're just like, it means nothing. How many years you've been doing it doesn't matter. This guy that just started a week ago is like now the biggest thing ever. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how much time you've put in, it'll forget about you like that. You know what I mean? So it's something to be aware of.
Yeah. And going into your journey some more, there comes a point, and you've mentioned, business, the business side.
Yeah.
And you go from a kid with a big dream to all of a sudden realizing, wow, there's this whole other side in music and in creativity that's business. And I'm a kid that grew up on a farm, and I don't know about business outside of like, we make this and sell it to this person.
Right. That's it.
So how important is it to understand the business side of things as an artist when you move to a city like Nashville?
I think it can almost be as valuable as your talent, because this isn't a talent show here. I could name you 20 people that I think are some of the most insanely talented people in the world that nothing's ever happened with them, because probably because of some of the business acumen, or you know what I mean? Like, they don't understand how to like help themselves in some of these ways. And I think every artist has they have a percentage of like business and a percentage of, of creative, you know what I mean? And you'll meet these creative spirits sometimes where you're like, wow, that guy's an incredible creative burst of a person, but they're a mess as a person, right? Like they can't pay their phone bill, or they don't, you know what I mean? Like, just completely aloof of their life, but they're like a genius creator. And then I think like a big example of that would be Taylor Swift, who has an absolutely sharp business mind, but she's also super like, obviously she's an amazing songwriter. She has both of those skills. I mean, that's why she's the biggest artist in the world. She's a person that has both of those clearly. And then you'll see, like I said, I'm not going to name artists, but there's tons of artists or people that you probably know or you can think of that go, man, that guy's so talented. Why didn't anything ever happen? And I think it's having both of that. And I think for me, my successes have all been because of never giving up and just like, work ethic. And then, learning how it all works and then trying to adjust and course correct as I go through my career and go, oh, that's how that works. Maybe I shouldn't do that again. And your time is all you have, right? And so the more you know about what to do and what not to do and what has value and what doesn't, and I've had to learn it. I still am adjusting every day of who am I going to have on my calendar to write with? Is that going to be worth that day? Is that my ego talking, or is that like actually going to have value? You know what I mean? So it's like always course correcting to what that means. And like I said, I see so many young artists that I just go, man, you got to like realize what's happening around you, because there's a lot of moving parts, and this is how that makes money. That's how that makes money. And if you don't understand all that, it's going to be really hard to navigate.
Yeah. What's that young artist avatar look like?
You mean like what is it in today's age, you mean?
Yeah, like right now, 2024 going on almost 2025 in Nashville, writing, looking at your calendar, being pitched writes.
Yep.
What does it look like for that person that's coming in? Do you see a lot of the same thing over and over and over? And this is not in any way to belittle artists. This is just complete data and information and facts that I'm interested in.
Totally.
Like, do you see a lot of the same kind of person? Like, oh, this big artist is doing well, so all of a sudden I'm writing with a lot of artists that want to cut songs that sound like this big artist that's doing well.
Yeah, and I think there's that, but I think what I'm seeing today a lot of is people trying to replicate what's happened to people like Bailey Zimmerman or something, where it's like they find someone on TikTok that has like a little spark and go like, hey, let's throw them in and try to like get them young and get them what they're, you know what I mean? Like before they, and signing these deals where they don't know, they're like me when I was 19, they don't know anything from Adam. Like they're just like, I had this manager hit me up and all of a sudden now I'm in a studio with Jake Rose today writing a song. And there's very little like development. It's like, I feel like I'm, guessing on development most days where I'm like, oh, you've not really written many songs, you know what I mean? And it used to be like you had to earn your way up. And that's not, like you said, it's not to belittle artists. It's just, that's the reality of where we are. I remember I wrote with Bailey before he blew up. And I remember Chief, his manager, was like, hey, you want to write with this kid, Bailey? And I remember writing with him thinking, yeah, he's a really young kid. Like, let's see what happens. He got a cool voice. He was really energetic and he was brand new, and dude, I mean, like 2 months later, all of a sudden we're like, hey, that kid you wrote with, it just blew up. And I'm like, what? Like, he just came to town, and I think people are trying to replicate that a lot. And it makes it hard as a writer, though, because, like I said, about valuing your time, and like what they don't understand is like, hey, the likelihood, unless you get on the radio as a writer, I'm not going to make hardly any money off of it. I mean, I'm talking like pennies. I couldn't even survive on the amount of money I make off of streams, you know what I mean, from millions and millions of streams. And
yeah, let's go there. So so I'm just gonna cut a big chunk out. Like you had the record deal part of your career. Now all of a sudden you're in the publishing world, writing songs with artists, up and coming artists, and you're writing for them. Explain that process a little bit. How you got there.
So after my second record deal, the band kind of we went on hiatus. I just felt like it wasn't working. So I was like, I always loved writing songs, and I always loved being in the studio. And every time I had the opportunity to be with, a Chris Lord Alge in the studio, I'm like, why are you putting that compressor on there? Or other writers. And I just got super fascinated with, being able to wear someone else's shoes for a minute and try to kind of write from their perspective. I love that. And so that's in 2017, I signed a publishing deal with my mentor, Kevin Kadish, who wrote all these big hits.
Yeah, say a couple.
All About That Bass and Whiskey Glasses, and he's had a bunch, and Jason Mraz hits and all this stuff. But I was kind of mentored by him, and so that's how I got a publishing deal and started. First, I was working on a solo record for myself, really. I was doing solo country stuff myself, and I had a little success doing that. I felt I started going down the same road I'd already been down, where I met with every label. They all turned me down and all that stuff. And I actually had a song called Sleeves that I wrote with Craig Wiseman that like got on the highway, and I was doing that for a bit. But
let's pause real quick. Craig, explain Craig just so people know about him.
Yeah, Craig is like a legend of Music Row. I think he owns half Music Row now, I think. But he owns a company called Big Loud, and it was called Big Loud Shirt because he always wears Big Loud shirts, and then became Big Loud, and they signed Florida Georgia Line, and then they signed Morgan Wallen, and they've just, it's just, their success is, unparalleled. But
so,
Craig,
yes, I know. So Craig, that's who he is.
Yeah.
Because he's got like what, over 30 number ones?
Over 30 number ones,
yeah.
Yep. But he came into my life, and I just felt so lucky to like have some of these doors open in the writing world. But even from 2017 to today, once TikTok came in, it's been so different. I can even say back then it felt a little more focused still. They were chasing playlists on Spotify and the highway and stuff like that, but most of it was still focused. Like Tim McGraw's recording in 2 months, so like send us all your songs for him. Florida Georgia Line's recording in the fall, so send us all your songs for them. Focused, like this is what we're writing for, and that's what we're aiming at. And now every day it's like, we're all guessing, and every day is a new artist that I've never heard of, and then I go check their TikTok, oh wow, 100,000 followers or whatever, and you see some post they did that blew up, and it's like, so-and-so manager is managing them, and they're gonna like put some songs out, and or even there's all these labels are signing young artists that have a little bit going on, but before they even put music out, it's like where they sign them. Or you have one song that came out and they signed you on that, and then they put a few more songs out and nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden I get put in this room with them, and it's like, yeah, basically they're not going to put anything out until I have TikTok success, right? And I'm like, well, what are we writing for? Are we writing for a viral moment on TikTok, or are we trying to write a great song? And that has been a huge change. And
so let's talk about both those. So like, let's say, because you had a Florida Georgia Line cut.
Yep.
Was it exactly what you just said? You knew they were going to cut a record, and so you decided in the room, like, let's try to write something the FGL would cut?
Yeah, I was writing with, they had their own publishing company, and I knew they were recording. And
was that Tree Vibes?
Tree Vibes.
Yeah.
And they had a writer named Red Farron who now is blowing up on TikTok, and he's an artist as well. But we were just, I think we were just writing a song that day, and we turned the song in just as a song, not necessarily pitching for them, but since they were his publishers, they heard it and they were like, hey, can we put this on hold for, this Florida Georgia Line record? And at the time, they were still with Big Loud, and Joey was making the record. And I actually was upstairs at Big Loud writing a song with Craig, and I got a text. My publisher kept calling me, and I'm like, what? Dude, I'm in a write. And I'm with Craig, who's like a legend. So it's like, hey, this better be good. I say, well, dude, what's up? And he goes, hey, FGO's recording your song right now. And I was like, they're below me in the basement with Joey Moy, like recording my song. And I'm like, Craig's like, what's going on? And I said, dude, I think I just got a Florida Georgia line cut. He's like, that's great, man. And like, let's get back to this song because Craig's had 30 number ones, so this was nothing to him. For me, I'm like sitting there freaking out. And then the thing was, they were like, and Joey wants to use some of your tracks, so can you send him your session? And I was like, this is like dream come true for me, because I'm like, oh, you want to use my track too? That's amazing. So anyways, I'm sitting in this right, but all I could think about was that. But that was very more traditional. Like, you can see the lineage. They have their own publishing company, so where are they going to pick songs from? This lineage of that, right? And I just think now, today, it's just like, it could be what's going to be the single, whatever works on Spotify, whatever works on TikTok, whatever works on Spotify. It's just so data driven now. And it's, in some ways, I can't complain, because my band and my music that like I do with my band has been a result of the democratization of music. Like, there's no radio, there's nothing. It's just people liking it and algorithms working in my favor. Now, on the other end of it, like when I'm writing songs for their artists, it's like I'm at the mercy of that as well. And it's just hard, because you just go like, man, that's a great song, and no one's ever going to hear it unless we make enough noise on TikTok. And I'll see artists now come in and say like, I just don't do the TikTok thing, man. And I'm like, it's hard, because it's like, I understand why you wouldn't want to do that, but it's also the way of the world now. And it's like, as a writer, I'm like, man, well, I have to know that, because if you're not organically streaming like a ton or going to radio, and you're not putting that effort out there, then it's just like, well, that I have to be careful of how I use my time as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It seems like literally the music business has been turned into the TikTok business.
Yeah, it's like
the virality business.
Yeah.
In which they take virality and then give it like a shot, like one shot, to see if it catches.
Right.
Am I far from...
No, you're not
being accurate there?
No, you're not. And then you're still going up against all the other natural things of like Luke Bryan's putting a single out this week. So you're already going up against that no matter what. And then you're also going up against something from out of nowhere just comes out and bumps up whatever you think. And it goes for the artists that have been around for a long time as well, where all of a sudden there's like this many spots on radio, and all of a sudden you got this person like, hey, well, this guy's blowing up on TikTok and they're about to put him to radio now, and now your single just got bumped down. You know what I mean? And you're just seeing it all the time now. And I think even publishers, my publisher, I talk with my point person, my A&R, and she's like, no one has any idea like what's going to work or not anymore. It's not as traditional. It's not as like, like I said, we're writing for Luke Bryan's record and we have the first single and it sounds like Luke Bryan. You know what I mean? It's just so random. And I think the music industry is in a big, like, changing spot right now. I mean, it's evolving in a big way. And I'm scared for songwriters. I'm scared that this job is not going to be a job like it is, or it'll be just whittled down to like, the few writers that get on the radio and the rest of it, you know what I mean? And for the longest time, you could have, like I said, you could have an album cut and survive. And it's just getting fewer and fewer and fewer. And I hear the deals that publishers are offering songwriters, and it's just like, it's starting to not even be like, you're going to have to drive Uber, dude, on the side, because how could you live on that?
All my friends that have, in transparency, because I'm not naming names, all my friends that have gotten pub deals, their first time deal was between 10 grand draw for an entire year to 30 grand. Right. 30K is the most I've had a friend get signed for their first publishing deal.
Yeah, and that's like, a lot of times it's like all your not even co-publishing, not even like getting anything back, and and
that's all your publishing. So that's half of the money that your song makes.
Exactly. Master publishing, there's that half, you sold that away, and that's all you have. And songwriters don't get any part of the master. So it's like, okay.
And then that's all recoupable.
It's all recoupable, just like we talked about.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, I've had a lot of streaming success for sure. Like where
let's talk about that, because like I want to go. You can be braggadocious and don't be humble for a second. Just talk about some of your cuts and just like list them out, and then I want to take it in a direction. Okay, well, I mean, the most like household name cuts is like Florida Georgia Line. This song called Countryside I have with them. I have a song with Meatloaf called Like a Rose that was on a big Meatloaf record, and one that
Colt Ford, he's done really well with this song I have called Crank It Up. I always hear it in the honky tonks and stuff, and it's streamed really well. And then in the rock world, my own band has a gold single called Fire Up the Night that's got like 150 million streams or something like that. And another band I used to open up for called Adelita's Way, I wrote and produced a song called Notorious that's about to be a gold single as well. And you can add it all up, and it's hundreds and hundreds of millions of streams. That's over 500 million streams at this point. And even on a monthly basis, like, my songs might be getting streamed 15, 20, 30 million times. And I see my publishing checks on that, and you would be shocked how small they are. You know, you would think you wrote a song for Florida Georgia Line, like, you must be living the good life off of that. And it's like, not in the publishing, you know, and it's just a different thing. It's not like having an album cut on a record that sold 4 million records. It's not that anymore, you know. It's all, and it's so singles driven of, well, if you don't have the radio single, then, like, you know, it's like feast or famine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what gets people on playlists?
I mean, I think there's definitely some squeaking greasing the wheels by labels. I think the labels have really infiltrated all of the big DSPs in a big way. Like, I remember when, like, you could, like, take the person from Spotify out and they'd come to your studio, and I think they still do that a bit, but there's a lot less, like, you know, completely independent. Like, I always talk about lineage, because I just like to, like, always look at an artist and then go, like, okay, who's the manager? How did this all kind of come together? And, like, what's underneath this artist? What builds this thing up? And you can usually, when you find success, you find this big lineage, and then you go, oh, okay.
Like Big Loud.
Right.
Because you had Morgan.
Right.
And then Hardy.
Yep.
And then Ernest.
Right. Right.
And if you look at the lineage, you're like,
we had Florida Georgia Line before that.
Oh, yeah, and FGL before that, which is like all these huge monsters, but you have this machine of a business that has the financial ability to spend $5 million over 3 years to get an artist to become that big.
Totally. And I think it's just like it was in radio, and when, you know, I experienced this on a major label, and it's like, they're not paying to play, but it's like they can provide so many opportunities that, like, an independent artist can't offer, right? Like, I remember going to do, like, events with radio events as an artist, and they would have, like, 5 free guitars for the radio station to give out. Are we paying for them to play us on the radio? No. Did we give them 5 guitars for free to give out, or tickets to our show? We would do all these shows for radio stations, like, for no money, like, where we would go play some show, you know, hey, whatever station in, you know, California wants you to come play this show. There's no budget, but we'll cover it as the label, so you guys go play it. And then lo and behold, they started playing your song on the radio. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's all these, and I think that there's still a lot of that even in the streaming world. And like I said, I understand from Spotify in some ways, or I'm not just picking on Spotify, all of them, all the DSPs, but, like,
which is a digital service provider.
Yeah, digital streaming platform. Yeah,
or is that what it is?
Yeah, digital streaming platform. Or it could be that too. I don't know.
Well,
Actually,
you're
I don't
probably
know.
right.
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
Mine sounds like a cell phone company.
Yeah, but I understand they can have events. They can, because they have all this money, right? Like, they can spend money, and that helps Spotify look better, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus helping someone, like, that's completely independent. Like, what do I have to offer you guys? I don't have, like, I'm not going to give you free guitar. You know, whatever. I don't know. So I think that there's a big part of that is still, you know, all the record labels invested in Spotify, so they have this stake in it. And so it's just kind of, it makes sense to me how that all works, but understanding it all doesn't make it any better to be like, oh man, really, you guys are still all kind of controlling all this. So it's always going to be a fight for an independent artist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's interesting that you said that you're worried, or I don't remember exactly how you said it, but you're afraid that songwriters aren't even going to have a job.
I just think it's like writing songs that even have success, right? Like, because what's the goal here as a songwriter is to write songs that a lot of people want to hear, because that would have value, right? And it's like, I'm a case of it, of like having these songs with my band that have 50 million or 60 million or 30 million streams, and you just go like, surely that's worth something, right? And then, like, you see a check for $500 sometimes once in a while, and you're like, I can't live off. I mean, like everybody knows how inflation and the world and the where we live in today. It's like you can't live off of that. Like, what do you expect? You know what I mean? And if you're on the radio, I think Nashville is still propped up on this like radio. It's still juiced by that, and it's
it
like
is terrestrial radio.
Totally,
yeah,
totally. And every week on Music Row, there's another sound that goes up #1 in some publishing house. But I just think to myself, like, it's just. The model is not going to continue to work that way forever. And there's just not enough to go around. Like, there's not enough radio singles to go around. That working class lunch pail songwriter that like shows up, writes 120 songs a year, gets 20 cuts on 20 major label things, and none of them are the single, but they're on this record that had a hit on it. They're on this record. Like you said, you could make a living doing that. Now today, that just means hardly anything. And like, as a publisher, I could see it being economically not making sense. Like when we talked about those deals, 10,000, 30,000, it's like, there's a good chance that they still don't recoup that. You know what I mean? And then you're a publisher and then you go in, let's say you have a songwriter at 30,000 a year. And the first year they don't have any cuts, or they have a streaming song that streams 10 million. Yay, 10 million streams. Well, yeah, but that only made $2,000 or whatever it makes, And does that pay back the 30,000? No. And then they go into another year, another 30,000. And then the next year they have a song that gets 20 million. So you doubled your revenue. Still, it just doesn't add up, right? Like, and that's what I worry about, is that like this job of being a Nashville songwriter is like limited unless it's so cutthroat, unless you have radio success, you know what I mean? And you almost need a hit once in a while to kind of keep you in it, right? And keep your balance, pay your balance back. And it can happen in other ways, like sync and stuff like that. But
yeah. Where have you seen the most money for you personally in terms, because we were talking on the phone yesterday about your ownership of your music.
Yep.
And how even though rock radio isn't a thing, you're having success on Spotify with streams. What's that look like? Because that's really the ownership. This is how important it is, because that's really where the money is going to be for the artist and songwriter.
Right. And I don't know what we'll keep in or not. Like back to our original conversation about record labels owning masters and stuff, and having these like backwards business deals where you go like, hey, we're going to charge you 85% interest on the money that we give you. And when I started releasing music, when I wasn't under any contracts anymore, just putting a song out, and owning the recording, owning the master. And at that point, I was just using sweat equity of just like, I learned how to produce. I had bought some microphones and bought Pro Tools and some plugins. And over the years, I just always kept building it up. And I had been working in the country space on other people's records and just learning that. And finally just said like, I'm just going to go on TuneCore, press upload. We do have a decent amount of like followers on Spotify. It was not a ton at the time. I think we were at like 60 or 70,000 monthly listeners, and I put a song up and didn't have much expectations. And all of a sudden that song got 5 million streams, then it was at 10 million. And all of a sudden our monthly listeners are up to, 300,000. And I'm like, wow, like that's crazy. So then I put another song out, and that's like all of a sudden that goes up to 600,000 monthly listeners. And that song got 15, 20 million streams. And then I did another one. And then that's when TikTok came in and all that stuff. And
were you using just the Spotify pitch tool to do that?
That's it. No playlists. And I tell people that because...
So you didn't get any curated Spotify playlists off of those songs?
Nope.
And you got that big of numbers?
Yep.
Organically?
Which is like, I don't know,
So you just your music resonated?
That's it. Like I say, I call it the great democratization of music, where it's like, hey, anything goes. And by the way, the song that really started resonating was from my second album that everybody on my team said there's no singles on this record, kind of thing. I mean, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. They let me make that record, but no one really believed in it, because we got dropped very quickly afterwards. Like, it came out in August, we were off the label in like December. You know what I mean? And there's a song on there that's a gold record now. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you never know that song came out 10 years ago. It's getting millions of streams now. And, when people just choose what they want to listen to, and if you can build up enough of an algorithm and just keep adding to that, and like the big thing I talked about at the beginning, bringing it full circle, I believe in every song I put out now. I don't ask anybody. There's no A&R person. I'm the A&R person, and my fans are the A&R person. And this is something that Craig always told me was like, let America be your A&R person. And he told me these stories about Florida Georgia Line and how they would go play a show, and at the time it was iTunes downloads, and they would like play a show. What songs did you play tonight? We played Cruise. We played this one and that one. Well, all the other songs got 20 downloads, but Cruise got 75. So it was always like, okay, well, there's your song, right? And for me, it's like that with streaming, where I'm like, okay, wow, like people love that song. And I might even think it's this one, but it's that one, right? And so that's huge. But going back to the monetary part of that is, it's like 10x what you get paid as a songwriter. And I'm only recouping my sweat equity, which on a lot of those records was zero. Like it was just my Pro Tools subscription, my house, right? Like I just made the records myself, and I'll invest in records now. Like I'll have a mixer or somebody bring people in on stuff, but it's a game changer when you own the recording, when you have a song that gets 10 million streams. I mean, it's a game changer.
That you own
the recording of. Like you paid for the recording. And so I think people trade away so quickly, like all ownership in the recording for like, you know what I mean? And people will waste money by being like, we got to go to Blackbird and we got to have some crazy mixer mix this for so much money. It's like, all that is a risk that you have to make that back up with success, right? And versus doing as much as you can yourself and you know what I mean? Like putting your sweat equity in and trying to maintain as much ownership as you possibly can. I mean, I can't recommend that enough. And I also can't recommend enough how quickly 10 years goes by. A lot of these people have like 10-year re-records, or you could put things in your contract that would say, hey, look, you guys can have this record. I'm going to exchange it for 10 years. You can have this record to this record label. But I want to get it back eventually. And I've been able to get a few of my masters back from my labels. And when I was young, I would have thought, when I'm in my 30s, oh my God, I'll be so old by then. You know what I mean? And now I'm like, hey, that went quick. I'm also and I feel like I'm still in my prime now. So I would encourage young artists to understand ownership. And Jelly Roll is a huge success story in that. He owned his masters, and I think he still does, as far as I know. I mean, and a lot of people that can afford, once you can afford to pay for your own recordings or make them yourself, you don't need all these people. You don't need to take those terrible deals. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was asked before, and I've been asked, and I get DMs about, people that want to move to Nashville. And they always have these questions, and they're like, what should I do? And I had a friend, I taught guitar for a long time, and he, graduated high school and he wanted to go to Belmont and get his music business degree and all that. And he was going to have to take out student loan debt and all this stuff. And I just talked to him about the realities of like, well, if you're just going to be a guitar player, this is what it's going to look like. This is probably how much you can make. If you get on salary with an artist, they're going to have a hot streak for X amount of time. You could get dropped at any time and be replaced. All these realities that we don't know when you're just young and innocent and you have that blind optimism.
Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So now I'm at the point where I almost have such a grim view of the music business from living here and just the conversations I've had and meetings and things. It's, to me, like, I almost want to write a book that's like, don't move to Nashville if you're a musician.
Right.
Like, just don't do it.
Right.
Dominate your market.
Right.
Right. Like wherever you live, if you live back in Sacramento, California, go and play there and become the biggest whatever act that you are there.
Right.
And then have them support you. And then eventually you'll have enough negotiating power if you do go like what Cody Johnson did with Warner, turning them down multiple times.
Right.
And then finally signing when they're like, you can have what you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But when you're a young kid, you don't think in terms of like, I'm going to be in my 30s and have a wife.
Right.
And like, we might want to have kids someday.
Or in a house.
And then buy a house.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, do you want to be broke? Or do you want to actually be able to pay your bills? And these are the realities that I don't think we address unfortunately, as musicians, and you stated it so well earlier when you said, I just grew up, on a farm, and we weren't like 60-page contract people.
Right.
Like you have common sense.
You do the work, you get paid. You do the work, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. You do the work,
you do a little more work, you get paid a little bit more, right?
Yeah. And
not here.
Not here. And so it's such a hard pill to swallow. And when you realize it, there's a level of grief too that I think a lot of musicians encounter when they do sign the deal and get dropped, or they put that 10,000 hours in. I think about doctors. How much time did they have to spend in school versus the guy that picked up a guitar when he was in junior high school and put in more time than the doctor?
Totally.
And is barely getting paid anything and can't pay his bills.
Right.
It's so unjust, man.
It is.
But I interviewed Joe Bonamassa, and he said, whose fault is it? And he blames it on us as the songwriters, the musicians, because you don't have to take the gig. That's what he says.
Right, yeah.
But it's easier said than done when you're Joe Bonamassa, because
it is.
He has his career established.
Yeah. Even where I'm at, I can. It's easier for me to say
and
now.
It's easier for you to say. But all that to say, that big monologue to say, what would you genuinely tell the young kid that's like big dreams, rock and roll, singer-songwriter?
Right.
Hey, Jake, I want to move to Nashville, to pursue my career in music, to make it. That's my end goal. I want to be on the radio. What do you tell that? How what's the honest, if we just cut straight to it, what's the honest answer to that person?
I mean, I think that unfortunately it's different for every person, because if that person has that thing, someone's got to do it, right? Someone's going to get the gig as the next person, right? But I agree with a lot of that sentiment you just said. And even if you told me now, would you go back and do that all, where you risked all this stuff? And I would have a hard time knowing what I know now, because I know there's a portion of luck. You asked me what happened with my band. Why did we get all these streams? I don't know. It's luck. I got lucky. I worked hard, but everybody works hard. I'm talented, but everybody's talented. You know what I mean? I say that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You go to Broadway right now. We could go down to Broadway right now and see a guitar player that could blow me out of the water, a singer that could sing the phone book. But why did it work out for me? I don't know. I mean, it takes some of that, like you said, blind optimism. But I would say expectation, right? That's a huge thing in reality, like you said about realities. People don't understand that. You brought up a great point. I remember hearing some of the biggest country acts, because I have a couple of friends that joined their bands, and what their salary was. And I'm like, wait, is that it? There's wait, but you get a piece of merch, and they're like, no, that's my salary every year, and it's not, it's like a job, and it is not going up increasingly if they're playing stadiums. I'm telling you, stadium act bands. And then knowing that reality, and when you're 20, you go, wow, let's say it's $100,000 a year. $100,000 a year to play guitar. Oh my God, that's incredible. But that's it. That's the top. That's if you got the biggest gig in the world. And if you did anything else, you might, if you were a doctor, you could, crush that, right? So I would just say having expectation, right? It is fine to do your art. I've been reading Rick Rubin's book, and I was
going to go there with you.
It's fine to do your art, and then have a side gig too, or maybe art is the side gig. You know what I mean? Maybe you have to have a job during the day, or you do something around music. I'm a sound guy, but I also have a project. But I make TikToks for artists and do video work, and then I'm making an album of myself. And having that expectation that being realistic with your expectations is what I would say, because we all want to be that rock star. I still want to be, and I have success even, and I still say of course I want to I always say I go to the moon. Of course I want to go to the moon, but I've made it where I'm making music for a living, and that was always the goal. So I have to stop myself and go of course I want that, but my expectations are here. I'm 36. Am I going to be the hottest new star now? Probably not, and I'm cool with that. But just knowing, if you come here, know that most people don't make it. that would be like a lucky thing, right? So if you still want to do it knowing like, hey, you're 99% chance you're not going to make a living making music, are you cool with that? And if you are, then definitely. And I remember myself, and I think that has changed because of my experience, but when I was 19, I was that. And that's why I think I stayed, you know what I mean? Because I had every reason not to. But I remember thinking, it's not about money for me at that time. It really wasn't. I was just like, I want to do this no matter what. I don't care what I have to do it. I'm going to do it. And I could say maybe that's part of why I'm here still. But it takes that much like blind like faith and dedication. And if there's any doubt in you, don't come, because it's like it takes that much.
Yeah. I think that's a great answer, and that's the honest answer that a lot of people need to hear. Yeah.
I can see it. I can see it in artists where I go, they're already like, I'm like, you don't have the thing where you just, you know what I mean? I can see there's doubt. I can see there's, maybe I'd go home to, maybe I'd move back home, and maybe I'll, maybe, you know what I mean?
Or they don't know who they are.
Or you see like just realities.
Yeah.
I have a kid. Now I got a kid to feed. And now you have a wife and you have a family, and is it really responsible for me to like spend all my time? You know what I mean? Like those realities come into play. And I dedicated so much when I was young. Like I didn't get married until I was in my 30s and all that stuff, having a house, all that stuff. I sacrificed all that for so many years. And so whatever your expectation of what you want your life to be, just understand that. And most people that come to Nashville to be a musician are going to end up being a broke musician. That's part of the deal. And that's why it's the punchline and jokes that people are like, oh, do you. And so just know that reality and be cool with, if that's really what you want to do, be cool with, hey man, you might not be rich and famous. Most likely you won't be. So just know that.
Yeah.
If you still want to come, then come.
My friend who's a publisher and really was in it in the 90s during the era of like writers and publishing.
Yeah.
I've always asked him, but he always says, the question is, do you recommend anybody move to Nashville? His answer's always been no.
Right.
But then he says, but if me telling you no is going to keep you from moving to Nashville, then you should never move to Nashville.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's that 1%er. That's you that has the blind optimism, the blinders on, and I'm going to go for it. And I think the big thing, and you had mentioned inflation, like, and my buddy Luke says this, he says, don't have the latest iPhone, don't have a big car payment, like drive a beater, live with friends, don't have a lot of monthly expenses, don't get into debt, because all of those things are just going to be a chain every time you go to try to write, because you're going to be thinking, I need to make money, instead of what's the best thing I can make creatively today.
Right.
Which is where I want to end.
Right.
Because you're reading Rick Rubin's book. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge Rick fan.
Same.
And one of the things he says, the biggest thing he says that resonates with me is think of the audience last.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I agree with him. I think that, again, circles back to our first part of this conversation of saying, like, my first single of my label, they were thinking of the audience first. And what happened with that song? Nothing. When I make music today still, I think, do I love this? Do I want to sit and listen to this? I write songs, again, with artists that come in or songwriters that come in, and there's this like theory, I feel like, that you can outsmart the listener. Everybody, like, I feel like new songwriters come in, and I think I did it too. Especially when I stepped into the country space and think like, oh, all we got to do is write about girls and trucks and beers and we're going to be on the radio. And it's like, you can't outsmart the listener, dude. Stop trying to do that. You got to make something that you would listen to, right? And those are the songs that when you leave a session and you like play the demo over and over and over again, or send it to your friends and they keep talking about it, those are the ones, you know what I mean? It's not the one that sounds like a ripoff of the latest thing on the radio. And it's a derivative thing. Like, so yeah, I agree with Rick. Like, think of the audience last. And I say this, I write for the front row, not for music row, because, I know I just said not writing for the audience, but what I mean by that is like, I don't want to write for people that are like the gatekeepers of the music industry. I want to write for myself, and usually that resonates with the fans. You know what I mean? Like, love the song yourself and then take it to the fans. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, the best way to create.
Yeah. If you're going to sing it every night, you're going to want to make sure you like it.
You got to love it. Yeah. And again, like my first producer said, like whatever you kind of come out with, that's, you got to make sure you stand for that, right? Like, what are you about? Are you about just saying whatever just to get attention? Because people are going to poke holes in that really quick. You know what I mean? So what are you really about? And that's something I still work on today, of making sure that like I keep my authentic self in my songs and stuff. And I try to keep the artist in the room on that path. I'm like, would you say that? Or is that something that like sounds good in the room, but you really wouldn't want to sing that on stage? You know what I mean? Listen to that gut. Listen to the songs that you go, I don't know about that line, but my publisher thinks it's great, so I'm going to keep it. You know what I mean? Well, if you don't know about it, then there's a reason for that. So listen to that intuition.
Yeah. It's so important that we listen to the people that came before us and learn their stories, because we can learn so much of what not to do from listening to people that have already been there. And you've already been there, and you shared so much of your experience today. And I really, really appreciate you being here on the podcast, because the younger, both of us, I think would have benefited from this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here. And I don't know everything, but I definitely have been in the trenches of the business and still am. I don't know it all.
Yeah.
But I've seen it from a lot of different angles. And the more knowledge is power, and transparency is power. And it's just, I'm hopeful. That's the hopeful part about this, is that hopefully we can get this message out to younger artists and stuff, that to understand how this all works and what it is, and it's always evolving and stuff. And so I hope some of this can help.
Yeah. And if people want to follow you and the band, can you give us all those deets?
Yeah. So I'm on all the socials as Jake Rose Music, at Jake Rose Music. And then my band is at New Medicine Rock. And so I check all of our stuff out, and I'm always on there. And sometimes I do some tidbits of music industry, tips and what not to do or what's happening today and stuff. So
all right,
check that out.
Yeah, everybody be sure to follow Jake. And thanks again for being here today. And hopefully we chat again.
Absolutely. This was awesome.
Yeah, dude. I feel like there's a lot I would love to get, because you said the word gatekeepers. I was like, dude, I could keep talking to you all day long.
Oh, man. I mean, like, that is my biggest.
That opens a whole nother maybe we need to do a part 2 on gatekeepers.
I mean, that's been my whole life. I mean, you heard in the beginning where I said how many labels said no, how many people told me that this song's not going to be worth anything. And I mean, you just cannot listen. Damn the Torpedoes, don't listen to them.